Good evening, everyone. My name is Sean Lim, and I'm the Director of District Implementation for First Robotics Canada. And thanks again for joining us for another episode of Ask the Experts. And tonight we have a webinar to take a look at some robot release videos. And so there are a couple Canadian teams that we're going to specifically spotlight, which is going to be great for the local community here because this will give you some insight on some of the robots that you can expect to be playing with and against at our events here up in Ontario, up in Canada. And we're also going to be looking at some of the powerhouse teams from around the world, teams which are maybe a little bit more recognized for producing these robot release videos, and may also have a reputation for producing pretty good robots as a result as well. And if we have time to get around to it, some of you may know that there have actually been some unofficial competitions that have taken place, some real Steamworks matches out in various parts of the world, and they were live streamed. There is video footage, archive footage, in case you want to review them as well. But a few of the panelists have had a chance to take a look at those week 0 competitions, and there's probably some observations which are worth sharing as teams move into week number 1. And up here in Ontario, week 1 would include Durham College, which is scheduled to start basically this Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce, first Mr. Paul Keenan, our first senior mentor. Paul, glad to have you again with us. Paul, how you doing?
I'm good. It's great to be here once again, Sean.
And Paul, of course, will be moderating for us. And so if you have any questions or comments as we're going through tonight's webinar, please make sure you click on that chat section of the webinar window and ask your questions, and Paul will ensure that it gets answered either during the webinar or during the question and answer at the end. But I'd like to take a moment just to introduce our 2 panelists for this evening, first of which is Edwin Xu. He is the former head of strategy for Team 610, Crescent Robotics out of Toronto. They are the 2013 World Champions. Edwin, great to have you on board. How are you doing this evening?
Pretty well, Mr. Lim. Ready to talk, I guess.
All right, Edwin, and this was your job on 610. It was your responsibility to do all the scouting and to make sure you had a good workup on all the teams that you were going up against into your competitions. And likewise, we have Brennan Bibic, who is the head of strategy for FRC Team 4476, better known as the Waffles, out of Kingston, Ontario. Brennan, how are you doing this evening?
Good. Pretty excited to talk about some stuff today.
Awesome. And Brennan, obviously, as a head of strategy, same thing. You are a current student member of your team, and this is your job to give your team, the best chance at competing out there, to know all of your opponents and potential partners backwards and forwards. So this is kind of fun and work for you at the same time.
Yeah.
And so just for those of you who aren't familiar with what robot reveal videos are, it's actually pretty straightforward. It's not something that's mandatory. This is something that teams do for fun, but you've poured blood, sweat, and tears into your robots for the past 6 weeks. It's kind of nice to be able to show them off a little bit. And so what a lot of teams do is they'll set aside, a few students to produce a short video clip just to highlight, some of the more impressive facets of your robot. And so just as I'm saying this, I've got a robot reveal video playing, and this happens to be Team 148, the Robo Wranglers out of Greenville, Texas. They're pretty renowned for producing these robot reveal videos, pretty reliable. They'll put one out every year. But as you can see, there's some very good information that can be gleaned from these robot reveal videos. And that's why they're so interesting, because these robots have been a very closely guarded secret, basically right up until this point. And so, this is the first opportunity that we're getting a chance to see other robots. And in this particular case, the Robo Wranglers robot, you can see it's pretty impressive. It's got some gear scoring functionality. It's got some fuel shooting functionality. This is widely regarded as one of the elite teams in the world. And so if you're looking at this and going, well, my robot doesn't really do that right now, please don't feel bad, because probably 99% of us out there are probably saying the same thing. But these robot reveal videos are a lot of fun. And our two panelists, Edwin and Brennan, you'll get that impression as we go about tonight talking about these videos very much the same way that, as much work as it is to watch these videos and to scope out the competition, it's a heck of a lot of fun to see how all these other teams have decided to solve these problems and in very much different ways than maybe your team might have. And so that's what these robot reveal videos are in a nutshell. And actually, since we've got this video up here, Team 148, Brennan, is this video one that you've seen already? I'm assuming
Yes.
it is.
Yeah, I have.
Your thoughts? Any initial thoughts on this particular robot?
When I first saw it, I was really, really impressed with their gear intake and just how they can intake balls over top of their gear, or interspersed. They showed that in the video, they had balls and then gears and then balls again, and they could still pick up, which I thought was pretty awesome. I think that's one of the biggest things that I thought that, this robot really has that stands out even from elite teams.
Yeah, I think that's something where we may not see. It's quite possible we don't see another robot in all of FIRST that has that capability. Where
Exactly.
yeah, that's the shot right there. If I can kind of pause, they've picked up a gear at the front of the robot, and even though there's a gear stuck there that they've captured, they're still able to drive over fuel and pick those up as well. So definitely a super unique one. Edwin, any thoughts about the Robo Wrangler's robot?
I think the robot has a lot of really cool, small quirks to it that you don't really see throughout the video, but there are things that the Robo Wranglers have really thought deeply about, such as their agitator for moving the balls into the shooter. Maybe some teams are struggling with agitating the balls into their shooter, and the Robo Wranglers have found a really elegant solution for that.
Yeah, and on this video, can you actually see, a lot of the details and how they've done it? I guess it is that kind of, I think we had a good shot of it right there. It's just kind of a central shaft that spins really, really quickly.
Yep.
Yeah, and so I think we'll see something similar from a lot of different robots, but this one looks to be done very, very sort of cleanly and precisely. But very nice. So far, so good. But we don't want to focus on the Robo Wranglers too much because I think really a lot of what our audience is maybe most interested in would be our fellow Canadian teams, of which we had a few different teams produce videos. So, excuse me, we have first up from our Canadian spotlight, Team 1285, the Big Bang. So this is kind of the twin team for the slightly older 1241. That's Rick Hansen Secondary School out of Mississauga, also known as Theory 6. But as we're playing this one, this is a really, really interesting robot. 1285 actually has a reputation for maybe building robots which are a little bit off the beaten track. And this one is, immediately my thoughts are it's pretty small, it's pretty low. And they may have made some very interesting trade-offs strategically that makes this robot particularly interesting. And so I'm just going to reload this one, but I'll hand this one over to you first, Edwin. But for the Big Bang, 1285, any initial thoughts about their particular video and anything that's caught your attention?
I think that it's really interesting that they decided to go for these straight gears. I know that Big Bang's known. I think Big Bang's their grade 9 and 10 students, which means that they may not have the technical experience to do everything, but they can do one thing and do it very well. So I think that's a very good decision for them to go gear specialization. They have, right in that shot right there, they have a wide intake for gears. It should be very useful for handling gears that teams may drop from the human player station while loading under defense.
Yeah, Brennan, I want you to expand on that one because this gear intake is not something we're going to see a whole lot of. This is my prediction, particularly in Ontario. A lot of teams, as they were going through their 6 weeks of build, you had to make trade-offs because there's only so much space that you have to build your robot. And, if you choose to have a shooter, if you choose to have, a gear mechanism that can load from the slot and then score it onto the springs or onto the lift, a lot of teams, I think, have chosen to sacrifice the ability to be able to pick up gears off the ground Whereas 1285, just kind of looking at this robot, it really looks like that they have prioritized that instead and done the opposite. And I could be wrong, but I'm not seeing a whole lot of other mechanisms on here to do a whole lot else. But Brennan, what are your thoughts on that choice and, and this mechanism that we zoomed in here on?
Yeah, I think it's super smart, especially for like a younger team with younger students on it, to be able to focus on a few things and do them really well. And that's something that I think people are starting to realize more and more within the FIRST community, that sometimes trying to do everything beyond your capabilities isn't a great idea. But especially for them, just the way that they've executed it is just really, really nice. I think especially for earlier events when there's going to be a lot of drop gears, because they are attending Durham this coming weekend, I think they'll definitely have a field day with all the gears that are around, and they'll be able to get a whole bunch of rotors spinning really, really quickly. And then with that hang at the end, I think they'll seed very high and probably go very far in eliminations.
So you do see that happening. You see a lot of gears on the ground and probably very close to where the lifts are, and that, I guess this would be analogous to just slam dunking them, right? Picking them off the ground, maybe needing to only drive like 2-3 feet, essentially, just to finish them off and put them on the lifts. Because, yeah, I mean, that's what you're foreseeing for these guys, Brennan?
Exactly. And then the other thing, too, is like if they are paired up with a robot that maybe can't deal that well with like drop gears, or maybe they occasionally drop gears, they really complement really well, because they can kind of, if your partner drops a gear, they don't have to worry about it being in the way in the future, because they can just go and get Big Bang to pick it up and score it pretty quickly. So
Edwin, I'm going to swing that one over to you in terms of predicting how this game is going to be played. So do you think 1285 is going to get the opportunity to pick up a bunch of drop gears? Or, I mean, this is a risky decision. I mean, I don't want everyone to think that this is a slam dunk decision, because in hindsight, what if there are no drop gears? What if, they've made this huge sacrifice to not really do a whole lot else, much else, really focus on the drop gears, but you're in a situation where there are no drop gears. Like, Edwin, what do you think? Are there going to be a lot of drop gears? Are there not going to be a lot of drop gears? Or do you think that'll change throughout the season as we go? Like, I think there's a story to be told about, how 1285's season may pan out based on that. But what are your thoughts?
I agree with Brennan that I think that at the earlier events, especially I think probably the first 3 weeks, you're going to see a lot of teams that are, while they're trying to pick up gears from the human player station across the field, and maybe they'll drop it on the first try. Big Bang has a lot of value there. But one more thing, that Big Bang also has a value in the later weeks, because I think that we're going to see a lot more gear defense at the airship in later weeks, and Big Bang is able to clean up gears that have been dropped while defense is being played on the airship.
That's very interesting. Like, basically defense playing it so hard and hitting other robots to the point where you cause gears to be dropped. With a lot of passive gear holders, I could feasibly see that happen. And what would be even more devastating would be if you cause your opponent to drop a gear and then you steal it. I mean, that's a huge net negative swing in your favor if you can actually pull that off. Really, really interesting. Okay, we spent a lot of time on Big Bang, but we got to keep moving on to our other ones. But a very interesting robot, despite it looking very simple and being very small. It sounds like the panelists are very, very high on Big Bang. But we're going to play now Team 3360. This is Team Hyperion out of Sherbrooke, Quebec. And so unfortunately, we won't get a chance to see a whole lot of these guys in Ontario. But prior to the district model, these guys, were very, very common visitors to us out here, and have been known for building, what I have a very biased opinion, but some of the most aesthetically pleasing robots maybe in the history of FRC. But for these guys, this is a beautifully produced video. And from functionality standpoint, we're seeing maybe more of a traditional selection of functionality for some of our higher powered teams, but we've got obviously a fuel intake, shooter, gear scoring mechanism, but it looks like it's a passive tray. They just kind of let it slide in there, and then you got to pull it right out of just a fixed tray on the front of their robot. Very nice that they can load from the hoppers. Fuel shooter. And I guess we'll talk a little bit more detail about fuel shooting, accuracy, and rates, as we talk to the panelists. And pretty clean looking hang as well. So these guys look like they've got essentially a triple threat. They've got a climb, they've got the high goal fuel shot, they've got gear scoring, on the pegs. But I'll send this one to you, Brennan, because I think, Edwin, you had the first set of comments on Big Bang. But for Hyperion, Brennan, what are your initial thoughts on these guys?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, there's always those small details that you look at when you're seeing this robot. One of the things that I know my team was talking a lot about is having the intake on the same side as the gear mechanism to prevent like balls or other things from being in the way. And I think like even that small detail being a big thing that I think a lot of teams may struggle with. That maybe there's a whole bunch of balls around on the field and they may be in the way as well, which in addition to gears. But they look like they have a really solid robot. They're well put together. Their video is definitely like showing not cut super like how some teams sometimes like will cut it to make the robot look as best as it can. But, they're showing their hang fully driving up to the rope and grabbing quickly and stuff like that. So it makes me think that they're super solid.
Yeah, very interesting that you mentioned the intake in particular being on the same side as the gear tray, gear scoring mechanism, in order to clear out balls so that you can get to the lift to be able to clear out balls, and then take them in order to get to the slots to be able to load. And that's interesting because it makes me wonder whether a lot of teams actually had to do trade-offs, because Hyperion seems to have a very simple passive gear tray. But if you wanted to move more to an active one that had actuators or pneumatics on it, you might be cutting into space where you may no longer be able to do something like this by keeping them on the same side. So I wonder if they had to do any trade-offs in order to make that happen. Edwin, any final words on Hyperion?
I'm actually a fan of their firing location, so if you can go to one of the shots where they're firing fuel, but I really like how they're shooting right from against the boiler wall, presumably. And this is a really nice position because you basically have a hard stop to be shooting from, so you don't actually have to be scared of a team hitting you from behind while playing defense. But the side hit still exists. But I think that having that hard point shot is very, very nice.
Yeah, and we have kind of a term in FRC that we use for that. A lot of people call this like a checkmate position, where you run up against something. You run up against something on the field, whether it's a wall or a goal, and you wedge yourself against it. And that does two things. It allows you to very quickly line yourself up with the goal, because it's as simple as just running into a wall. And secondly, it makes you less vulnerable to defense, because if you get hit from the back, well, they're just shoving you into a wall, which isn't going to move, hopefully. And so you still stay lined up with your shot. So yeah, this is a very, very popular one. Of course, it means that you're shooting from basically point blank range. And there's some cons or some trade-offs to it. But generally speaking, in a game where there's a lot of defense, teams that we've seen shoot from this checkmate position, butted up against a wall or butted up against, some other field element, that's been really, really successful. So that's a really good point, Edwin. I'm glad you brought that one up. All right, continuing on our Canadian Spotlight, we're going to go to Team 1305, Ice Cube, the Neuroscience Robotics Initiative, or Student Robotics Initiative, my apologies. But these guys have been stalwart, especially on actually the Engineering Inspiration and Chairman's Award programs. But as of late, they've also been producing some really, really, really nice robots. And so this one here, I think, is probably the cleanest, prettiest robot that I've seen maybe 1305 produce ever. Just aesthetically, just really nice. Even some 3D printed shooter parts coming out there, the color coordination. But I guess as we cut to the actual parts of the robot where they start scoring and doing stuff, we'll see that it's pretty functional as well. So again, we're seeing a team that has chosen to do the fuel intake and the shots. And, in a way, I'm a little surprised to see this many teams doing it, but not really, because it tends to be your more established teams who produce these videos. And so it's kind of it's not, a really even cross-section of all the FRC teams out there. They tend to be your higher performing teams as a result. And my prediction would have been the higher performing teams to take on shooting. But through the bumper intake, which you guys might have a little bit to say about. Pretty solid climb, at least getting all the way up there. I don't know if we saw too much on how it engages the rope, but I'll send this one over to you, Edwin. Any comments on 1305 Ice Cube and an SRI?
Sure. So the first thing that we notice here is that 1305 has a turret, which the other teams that we've seen so far do not. Having a turret has a whole bunch of benefits, including basically you can fire from a hard point on anywhere on the field instead of just having to line up somewhere. So if you drive into any of the walls and you have your shooter tuned well, you're basically safe anywhere on the field, as we saw with Team 1241 last year.
Yeah, and this turret, depending on the range on it, opens up some really interesting strategies in terms of, not necessarily driving up against a wall or even the boiler or the goal/boiler, but I know some teams have specifically implemented a turret because they wanted to be able to shoot when they were up against the airship. And so this is kind of double dipping. When you're going and picking up gears and scoring gears, you need to drive up to the airship to drop off the gear onto the lift. And there have been some teams which have said, well, wouldn't it be nice if from that position we could kind of spin a turret around to point it at the boiler and shoot from there. And so it's kind of hard to see, but some shots of them shooting, they're definitely not shooting from right in front of the boiler. It feels like there's some distance there, and you're sort of thinking, well, why would you shoot, farther away from the goal intentionally? And so I think they're hinting at the fact that these guys might be trying to do that. They might be trying to shoot, not from right in front of the goal, but instead from when they're right up against the airship while they're scoring a gear. So that's going to be really interesting to see what these guys end up doing. And of course, I had to point this out with the agitators. We've already talked about that. One of the hardest engineering challenges with the robots this year is just getting these balls out of your hopper, your storage unit, and fed into your shooter quickly and efficiently without jamming. This looks like a super simple solution, and I would guess 1305 is proud of it. And I love these simple, effective solutions, even if they don't look super pretty. But it looks like they just took some tread off their wheels, and just zip tied it to some motors, and the act of those spinning around is basically what's feeding the balls into their shooter. Brennan, any other last comments on 1305?
Yeah, I guess the other thing is it looks like they went for a tall robot. This is the first tall robot that we've seen so far. So I'm not exactly sure what they're thinking, but maybe higher release point or something like that so that they can't be blocked or whatever. And then the other thing was I really do like their hanger because it's pretty different with their kind of claw thing in the middle of their robot that just kind of pushes down, grabs onto the rope and pushes down. Unlike some other teams, which we've seen a lot of, like Velcro or knot in a rope and then spin around kind of thing. So I'm interested to see how that works on the real field in a match.
Well, I didn't even catch that, so I'm going to freeze frame that here. It's a little blurry right now, but you're right. There's basically a big claw at the top of the robot, and I guess the knot hooks in underneath the claw, and then this claw just pulls downwards, and then the robot goes upwards. So maybe if I can play, that claw's starting to drop down, and that claw just goes downwards. And I see measuring tapes or some sort of strap pulling that down. So I think there's a winch in there somewhere that's pulling it up. But that's a really interesting method of doing that. That's very novel. I don't think I've seen anything quite like that before either. Very cool that you pointed that out, Brennan. But once again, really cool way to see how so many different teams have solved that engineering problem. That's pretty wild. I gotta say that's pretty cool. All right, moving on to Team 772, the Saberbites, of course, out of Windsor. Go ahead and play their robot reveal video. But these guys are basically the guys who've really driven the FRC program in that southwestern Ontario corridor, from Windsor stretching eastward even into the London area. But these guys are known for putting together some very nice looking, very high performing robots. But again, being a more established team, it looks like they've got a robot kind of with the same combination, which I guess I've been calling the triple threat, where you've got, definitely a gear scorer that can at least take a gear from the slot, put it onto the pegs, fuel intake to be able to pick up off the ground, and to be able to shoot into the high goal as well. Presumably with the open top, they should be able to feed from a hopper as well. And we've got their climber coming up too. Very nice video. Gentlemen, I'm gonna send this one back to you, Brennan. Your thoughts on 772?
Yeah, for sure. Once again, the same thing that I was noticing with a few of the teams too is having the intake on the same side as the gear mechanism, and that their intake's super wide so that they can get the balls out of the way. I mean, all around they just look like a really solid robot, but the gear mechanism seems to work real nice, and their hang looks pretty solid too, nice and quick. So, and big capacity from what it looks like. So if they can load from the top, super awesome.
Yeah, their sheet metal cube essentially looks like they've tried to expand their capacity as much as possible to essentially be a big aluminum box. I'd be curious to see what they're actually, Edwin, I'll send this one over to you before I jump into there, but Edwin, any thoughts on 772?
Just the same. I think I took a few stats on their kind of fire rates from their release video. So their peak fire rate from their review video is about 4 shots per second, which I think is actually pretty good. And then they've got kind of like accurate firing at 1.67 balls per second around the right in front of the boiler.
Yeah, that's one thing we haven't really noted too much was obviously the rate of fire, where it's one thing to be able to shoot these balls into the hopper, but a lot of early strategy conversations revolved around, well, you got to be able to do it quickly, or else it may not be worth it compared to a robot that could just dump them into a low goal, which is interesting because we have yet to see a robot that can dump any fuel into a low goal, and I'm not sure if we will. But you said it was about 4 shots per second for these guys. But the accuracy, that tends to be the trade-off, right? When you shoot faster, the shots tend to be a little bit less accurate. But you saw them really dial in their accuracy if they lowered the rate to, I guess, a little bit closer to 2 per second. Is that what you said? Yeah.
Yep.
So very nice.
I think that's something that teams are going to improve on anyways. Like, I'm sure they'll get that number higher and higher as they progress through the season and tune things and make sure that everything's working.
All right. Well, that's a pretty impressive contingent of Canadian robots that we've seen so far. But let's shift gears a little bit to some of the more, I guess, traditionally known powerhouses from around the world. And we've got a review video from the Neutrons here. And I may need one of you guys to jump in here because I'm trying to recall, the history, the bio for Neutron.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they've definitely, maybe 2013, 2014 was when they really started to get recognized, as they were pretty dominant in their district. They basically win every event. They have, like, they go to an absurd number of events. I think they go to like 3, 4, 5 minimum, not including World Championships. So they go basically every week, which is pretty crazy. That means they have a lot of practice on their robot by the time they get to World Champs too.
Yeah, and that's something that just would not have been possible under the regional models for these guys, because the costs just would have been absolutely exorbitant. But yeah, I recall that one year when their area, New England, went district, these guys absolutely just exploded. They turned into, I guess we recognize them as an elite level team in the world now. And it was pretty much due to their ability to be able to play and practice that much by competing in that many events. So they've really stepped up their game. And Edwin, your thoughts, because you were just talking about firing rates, right? This is
pretty crazy.
You tell us. What are we looking at here? My goodness.
All right, so first thing I noticed, they've got the turret, again, as we mentioned earlier, for the safe firing area across the launch pad. As you can see, their fire rate's insane. I can't actually count how fast they shoot. The video doesn't load that fast. But as you see their climber right here, I think I timed their climber at around 4 seconds, which is extremely good. So I think their point efficiency on that climb is very, very good.
So I see 4 competitions that right in that last slide that they said they were going to compete at. So there no rest for the wicked there. But yeah, looks like we'll be seeing them. Well, not in our jurisdiction. We won't run into them until the World Championships. But man, yeah, that's
4 events, not including district champs.
4 events, not including district champs, and there's some regionals kind of scattered in there as well. So, wow. All right, well, 125, the Neutrons, good-looking robot there. But we're going to move on to, I guess, another pretty well-known team. That's team number 16, pretty low number, so they've been around for a little while. But the Bomb Squad. The Bomb Squad is out of, oh, I should know this. I want to say Mountain Home, Arkansas.
I think so, yeah.
And of course, we're seeing, kind of the pride and joy of the Bomb Squad robots. They've been known for building one of the most incredible swerve drive systems. And so for those of you who've never seen one of these Bomb Squad robots before, it is, in fact, driving sideways, swerving. I'm pretty sure they have 4 independently driven drive modules, which don't just drive backwards and forwards, but they all independently steer as well. And so that allows the robot to move in any direction, rotate at the same time. It's pretty nuts. But again, it looks like they've opted for, the same kind of triple threat set of functionality, ability to shoot fuel in the high goal, pick it up off the ground. For them, they did show a gear intake to be able to pick up gears off the ground as well. So there's not a whole lot this robot can't do, we'll say.
Yeah.
I guess about the only thing is dumping it into the low goal, but if you can shoot into the high goal that well, it's probably not really much of a trade-off. But Edwin, did you have any thoughts or preliminary comments on the Bomb Squad, Team 16?
I think somebody actually says this every year, but I think that 2017 is also a good year for Swerve. But this year is especially good for Swerve because I honestly predict that there's going to be a lot of defense, and a Swerve drive allows you to overcome defense very well. And especially since you're scoring gears, which basically you have to be facing a certain way for your robot to score the gear, the swerve drive lets the bomb squad maneuver around defenders, and it also lets them reposition very easily onto the gear pin, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And swerve in combination with, I think I see it, there's an intake on both ends, on the front and the back of the robot. I don't even know what's the front and the back of the robot. When you can drive sideways like this, I guess it's on opposite ends of the robot, they appear to have a fuel intake to be able to collect fuel off the ground, unless I'm seeing things. But that's a very interesting thing that I noted as well. But Brennan, any other comments on the Bomb Squad?
I just really like their gear pickup. I think it's super clean. It's the fact that they can kind of swerve around the gear and then just doesn't even take time to pick up. You don't have to turn around or anything. It's super nice. I think they'll be able to get a lot of gears on the peg and scored.
All right, so this is probably what I would term, this might be the first robot that we've seen that can really do everything. Well, actually, beyond 148, which we did in the intro, but they can pick up gears off the ground, obviously score them, pick up fuel off the ground, score it into the high goal, and climb. So very impressive collection of functionality there from the Bomb Squad. I didn't think that they shot quite as fast as the Neutron's 125, but I think, Brennan, you mentioned that a lot of the times the rate of fire, and Edwin as well, a lot of the times that's something that can be tweaked strictly in software in a lot of cases, and you'll see a lot of teams improve, nearly exponentially as the weeks go by as they get that dialed in. And of course, we're going to finish off today with, at least with our showcase of videos here with Team 118, the Robonauts. I'll go ahead and play this, but this is probably the team that is most famous for producing robot reveal videos. Now, they didn't invent the robot reveal videos, but I often say that they were the first team to perfect them. And so this video is a lot of fun. Absolutely incredibly aesthetically pleasing robot. Very few, if any, robots in FIRST will be able to match these guys in terms of just how pretty it is.
Yeah.
But again, we're seeing, you know, at least the triple threat combination of a functionality, including a gear pickup, and of course that last sweeping in to be able to acquire the rope and climb at a super fast rate. But unlike the bomb squad, you know, no swerve, only a big intake on the front of, on one side of the robot, on the front. I can say that because they don't swerve on the front of the robot. And for this one, it looks like a pretty accurate shooter with a pretty high rate of fire. And there they are definitely demonstrating that strategy that we had mentioned with 1305, the ability to actually shoot when they are at the front of the airship. So not right up against it, from range. And in this case, demonstrating from right up against the wall, again, kind of protecting yourself from defense. And of course, just actuating a hopper, being able to load from that. But Edwin, we'll swing this one over to you. And of course, with their practice robot, doing 2 autonomouses at the same time with 2 robots. And I think this is the first time we've seen one of these autonomouses in a video, where they go to the hopper and basically shoot the balls that they're loading from the hoppers. Giving you the ability, you know, if you're really accurate, to maybe hit the full 40 kPa into the boiler and to earn that bonus RP. But Edwin, let's swing this one over to you. Your initial thoughts on Team 118's robot reveal video and their robot.
Sure. So right at the start, I think that we should really be focusing on their autonomous. They've got the 10 ball inside plus possibly the 50 ball hopper autonomous, which means that they could feasibly do a 40 kPa auto, which is insane, of course, but it also opens up a whole lot of other strategies for them, because it means that they don't have to necessarily focus on balls as much and instead can focus on finishing the gears.
Definitely. And Brennan, how about you? Any thoughts on the Robonauts?
Yeah, same thing. I think their hang is super, super clean. I'm pretty sure it runs off their drivetrain somehow, so like they're putting a lot of power into it, makes it really fast. And one thing that I was just noticing this time, I don't know how many times I've watched it, but this one time I noticed they had 2 cameras on their robot, it looked like, one for placing gears and one for aiming. So that's another thing that I think a lot of teams haven't done yet, and maybe that will be a big deal for lining up for those gears.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Lining up for those gears, considering it's happening on the far end of the field, and there are basically, well, actually, no, you're lining up the gears.
Are the close end.
The gears,
yeah.
The gears.
Like
Sorry, the lifts are right in front of your driver, so putting them on the lifts is fine. But when you're going to get the gears from the slot, you're on the opposite end of the field, with the potential for one or both of the airships to be in the way. And so having another camera to be able to guide you when you're down on the far end of the field, just trying to get to your slots. Yeah, definitely something that if you have not practiced with your robot on a real field, or at least a mock-up of a field, you're not really going to appreciate just how difficult that's going to be. So the really neat observation where you've seen a quote-unquote powerhouse team, you know, put what it looks like a second camera potentially to try and solve that problem. So before we wrap up, though, I did want to comment on, in particular, these powerhouse videos. You know, a lot of the times I remember when I first started doing FRC and I got wind of some really incredible robots and got video clips of them and felt maybe a little bit intimidated about them. I guess I just kind of want to temper that just a little bit. With a lot of these videos, often, I won't say all the time, but often they're cut in such a way to portray the robots to be at their very, very, very best. And so, hopefully you guys agree with me, and I'll go around the room with this one, but often what you see at a competition doesn't necessarily closely resemble what you're seeing in these videos. And so I don't want anyone certainly to feel deflated about it, which is kind of ironic because sometimes you see some not so great videos, and those robots end up showing up to competition, and they end up being like amazing. But Brennan, yeah, you is that something you would agree with? Like, take a lot of these videos essentially with a grain of salt?
For sure. I mean, look at how the video's edited. Just take note of it. I'm sure they have like the functionality, but what they don't edit or what they edit out or how many times they show a specific clip gives you a good idea of what their end product will look like going into week one. Obviously, teams improve throughout the competition season, so do keep that in mind, though. But yeah.
Yeah, and Edwin, what has your experience been basically with these robot reveal videos? More often than not, do you find that they're the videos themselves are way better than the robots generally, or pretty accurate, or what are your thoughts?
I think that most of the time they're pretty accurate, but every so often you'll find that team whose like robot signal light is blinking at 4 or 5 times the usual speed.
Yeah.
But you always get that some sort of thing. But I think what you should be taking from these robot review videos is basically what functions they could have and what they've been working on. So turrets and everything, the accuracy doesn't necessarily matter. It's just that it's there and that they could be working on it to make it a lot better for competition.
Yeah, so being selective about what information you take from it, and don't necessarily look on the performance of the robot, but just to know what functionality exists there, and then assess the performance of it when you're actually at the competition. That's some good advice, really good advice. All right, so now that we've done that, we still have actually maybe a minute or two to maybe just cover some week 0 observations, but I had a chance to see some matches. Brennan, I know you have as well. Edwin, I know you've been a little bit busy, may not have had a chance to catch a few, but at these week 0 observations, Brennan, were there any surprises or things that you didn't expect, or maybe some concerns or anything that may have caught your attention, from watching these week 0 competitions?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I wasn't too surprised. From what I saw, it was largely just teams practicing gears and trying to get as many gear cycles as they can in, and not doing too much with the fuel since it is so low points, and then trying to go for that hang at the end. But no, I think it's fairly straightforward. Human players are, I guess, they haven't been dropping gears as much as I thought they would. And first had that rule update or whatever, so that the handle doesn't fall out anymore. So
good.
I think a lot of those things, I don't know, pretty straightforward from what I've seen mostly.
Yeah, and I'd probably have to echo those sentiments. The week 0s, I think nearly everyone was just focusing on gears, get the gear, put it on, and there was maybe a small handful of teams that actually, no, there was a good number of them who attempted to shoot into the high goal of the boiler with varying levels of success, but I really only caught, at one competition, maybe 2 or 3 robots at that competition who were really doing it at a rate that was worthwhile, and even that could be a little bit generous, because strategically, maybe if they just continued to score gears, depending on what the exact number of gears was, they still might have been better off doing that. But I've yet to sort of see a robot. Basically, the week 0 real competitions that we saw, I didn't see anyone shooting at the rates and with the accuracy that we were seeing from these robot reveal videos. So 125 was probably the closest that I had a chance to see. But even then, match conditions are so different than a robot reveal video condition that I saw them put a lot of shots up. It was very impressive to see the stream go. And when they hit it, like they actually did hit a few on a few occasions, but to get it reliably where they were hitting those really impressive constant streams, every time they went up to the goal, they didn't quite hit that level yet. But Who knows? Partway through the season, we might start seeing that. Edwin, I know you didn't get a chance to see a whole lot of the week zeros, but of maybe what information you've heard or what you have seen, any surprises or anything of interest that you saw, from those week zeros?
I'm surprised that mainly people aren't dropping gears, and probably because it's a week 0. Maybe I think teams are trying to maybe work on their own robots a lot more and trying to focus on how they can improve instead of mainly, I guess, playing defense and shutting other teams down.
Yeah, and that's the thing. At a week 0 competition, it's not really a competition. It's kind of just a test run for everyone to get out there and get the robots up and running to see what you can do. I would say, there's kind of an unwritten agreement that teams really shouldn't be playing defense in an environment like that just because it is not competitive. You don't want to break another team's robot before you've even started the season officially. So there was a huge lack of defense during these week zeros, but understandably so. So I don't think we've quite seen what this game is going to look like quite just yet when there's defense. So you still have to hold your breath a little bit when week 1 rolls around. But I'll ask the panelists on this one, having seen some of these robot reveal videos now and seeing the week zeros, are we going to see a lot of defense? Are we going to see a lot of drop gears? Are those, teams like 1285 with those gear intakes really going to thrive on that? But I guess some Durham week 1 predictions. Edwin, what do you think? How is this going to change when teams start playing defense, assuming they even do? Do you expect defense at Durham week 1?
I think that at week 1 events, teams are still trying to do a lot more like ambitious play style, and instead of playing defense, they want to try and maximize their own score. But I think that eliminations in Durham, we're going to see a huge spike in defensive play, and that might throw off a few of the gear robots because I was at the Crescent Field last week, and one thing that I noticed was that if a human player drops a gear in the human player area and it kind of gets lodged, it's actually really hard for some teams to get the gear out of the way and to continue scoring gears. So I think that 1285 will actually get a lot of value at Durham.
Very interesting. Brennan, how about for you?
I agree 100%. I think it's very similar to last year with the defense that at early events where we saw that teams were mostly just trying to seed high during qualifications, and then once you get to elims, then it's less about getting the RP and more about just like winning the match. So we'll see a lot more defense in eliminations and maybe not very much in qualifications.
Yeah, that's an interesting one because if you're comparing particularly with last year, that's exactly what we saw in places like Ontario, for instance. But surprisingly, there were still large swaths of areas around the world where even in the elimination rounds, there was no defense to speak of. Like there are some notable matches where teams were just running up the score, not playing a lick of defense, and we're kind of up here in Ontario going, what's going on? Are you guys playing the same game as us? And so, maybe culturally up here, we're a little bit more attuned to being willing to play defense. It's part of our philosophy up here that, yeah, we're competitive. Defense is part of the game. Maybe it's kind of like a hockey analogy there where, we don't mind getting a little more rough and tumble. But yeah, I think I'd have to agree with you guys. But I guess that's a little bit of a warning to a lot of the other teams where, if you saw some of these week 0 competitions and you saw it was just teams running around scoring at will, you might get that for the most part during the qualification matches. But I think I'd have to agree with both of you guys there where as soon as the eliminations swing around, I'm willing to bet, in fact, that alliances will select their second pick, during that second round. I think there's going to be a lot of defensive specialists picked up. They won't touch a single gear the entire match or even a single fuel. Just disrupt the other alliance, and ideally, if you've got a hanger that's super reliable and you can count on those 50 points, I think you're going to be picked. You're going to make a big difference to your alliance, and you can potentially go far with a robot just like that. Any final words on week 0 observations from either of you guys, Brennan or Edwin?
No, I think that's pretty good.
All right, and so
I think we covered everything.
I think that's pretty much all the content that we've got for our official webinar for this evening. Paul, I know it's been a little bit of a quiet night, but I'll double check with you to see if there are any questions that have come in from the audience.
There have been no questions yet.
All right. So speak now or forever hold your peace if there are any, because if not, I will be moving on to wrapping up our segment for this evening and giving you guys a heads up that next week's webinar will be actually a recap. It'll be a recap of our week one event at Durham College because that is happening this weekend. I can't believe it. I've been spending a lot of time planning for these events, and they're finally upon us. And we'll get a chance to take a look at what were some of the more successful strategies. I believe we'll get a chance to see 1285 at Durham College, one of the more interesting ones, which, you know, they had a series of very different strategic choices that they made and trade-offs. And from the guys on our panel, feel like it's really going to pay off, especially at a week one event. And maybe they took that into account when they designed their robot. But that'll be an interesting storyline to follow on whether that ended up working out well for them. And even then, for teams who, you know, are competing in later weeks, you still do have an opportunity to continue to improve your robots. Maybe based on week one and what we see there, what some of the most popular or, you know, high yield improvements might be to help you guys improve over the next few weeks. But I wanted to take a moment to thank our two panelists, Edwin and Brennan. Thanks very much for spending your evening with us and sharing your time and expertise. Very much appreciated. And I hope you guys can join us for next week, and we'll see you guys soon. Take care and have a great night.
Night.